When Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist German Workers' Party rose to power in 1933, they implemented one of history's most comprehensive systems of information control and propaganda. The Nazi regime's ability to manipulate public perception wasn't merely an accessory to their political program. It was fundamental to their seizure and consolidation of power. In short, the Nazi Party systematically deployed information control, propaganda, and deception to transform a democratic republic into a totalitarian dictatorship in less than a decade. The Nazi propaganda machine didn't emerge in a vacuum. Germany's defeat in World War I, the harsh conditions of the Treaty of Versailles, and the economic devastation of the Great Depression created a receptive environment for radical messaging. The Weimar Republic, Germany's post-World War I democratic government, struggled with hyperinflation, political instability, and a national sense of humiliation. Hitler and his propaganda chief, Joseph Goebbels, recognized that this environment of crisis and uncertainty made the German population particularly vulnerable to simplistic explanations and promises of restoration. The Nazi Party capitalized on this vulnerability by offering clear villains, Jews, communists, the Versailles powers, and straightforward solutions, German renewal through national strength. Central to the Nazi information control apparatus was the Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, established in March 1933, just months after Hitler became Chancellor. Led by Joseph Goebbels, a man with a doctorate in philology and a deep understanding of mass psychology, this ministry became the nerve center of Nazi messaging. The ministry controlled newspapers, radio, film, theater, music, literature, and visual arts. By 1939, no information reached the German public without first passing through this comprehensive filter system. The Nazi control of information began with the process of Gleichschaltung, coordination, through which all independent institutions were brought under party control. For media outlets, this meant comprehensive domination across all platforms. By 1935, over 1,600 newspapers were either Nazi-owned or Nazi-controlled. Independent papers were either shut down or had Nazi editors installed. Radio, recognized as the most powerful mass medium of the era, became a state monopoly. The production of affordable people's receivers, Volksempfänger, ensured that Nazi broadcasts reached most German households. These receivers were deliberately designed with limited range to prevent Germans from accessing foreign broadcasts. The German film industry, already world-renowned through UFA studios, was nationalized. Entertainment films subtly incorporated Nazi values, while documentaries and newsreels delivered overtly political content. A comprehensive system of pre-publication censorship ensured that books, magazines, and academic journals aligned with Nazi ideology. The infamous book burnings of 1933 dramatically symbolized the rejection of un-German ideas. The Nazis understood that effective propaganda required not just control of content, but mastery of form. They developed distinctive aesthetic approaches that maximized emotional impact. Nazi posters, designed with bold colors, dramatic contrasts, and simplified imagery, became icons of political art. The swastika symbol, ancient yet simple, became one of history's most recognizable brands. Enormous rallies, like those held annually at Nuremberg, were choreographed as quasi-religious experiences, designed not primarily for those attending, but for the millions who would see them in newsreels. Monumental building projects conveyed messages of power, permanence, and the rebirth of German greatness. Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, 1935, pioneered cinematic techniques that transformed political documentation into mythological storytelling. A cornerstone of Nazi propaganda was the creation and dehumanization of enemies. This strategy served multiple purposes, providing scapegoats for Germany's problems, creating social cohesion through shared opposition, justifying increasingly radical policies, and distracting from government failures. Here, the headline, which refers to a caricature of a Jew, reads simply, "He is to blame for the war." Jews were the primary target, portrayed through crude stereotypes in publications like Der Stürmer and pseudo-scientific exhibits on racial biology. Other designated enemies included communists, the mentally and physically disabled, Romani people, homosexuals, and political opponents. Here, the headline reads, "This hereditarily ill person will cost our national community 60,000 Reichmarks over the course of his lifetime. Citizen, this is your money." The propaganda around these groups evolved over time, beginning with subtle discrimination and eventually justifying genocide. This gradual radicalization is evident in how anti-Jewish propaganda progressed from economic boycotts, 1933, to the Nuremberg Laws, 1935, to the state-sponsored violence of Kristallnacht, 1938, and ultimately to the final solution. As the Nazi regime consolidated control, Germans became increasingly isolated from outside information sources. Foreign newspapers were restricted. Listening to foreign broadcasts became punishable by imprisonment, and travel was tightly controlled. This information quarantine allowed the regime to construct an alternate reality for the German population. Military defeats could be presented as strategic withdrawals. Economic hardships could be blamed on saboteurs. The mass murder of Jews and others could be hidden behind euphemisms like resettlement and special treatment. Here, a stereotyped Jew conspires behind the scenes to control the Allied powers, represented by the British, American, and Soviet flags. The caption reads, "Behind the enemy powers, the Jew." Information control wasn't achieved through media manipulation alone. It required a comprehensive system of surveillance and punishment. The Gestapo's secret police cultivated an atmosphere where anyone might be an informant. Block wardens monitored neighborhoods for dissident speech. Children were encouraged to report parents' disloyal comments. The concentration camp system served as the ultimate deterrent against dissent. Nazi propaganda wasn't confined to Germany's borders. Recognizing the importance of international perception, the regime established foreign language radio broadcasts, carefully managed international journalists' access to Germany, created specialized propaganda for different countries based on local concerns, and used the 1936 Olympics as a massive international public relations campaign. Despite the regime's comprehensive control, pockets of resistance to Nazi messaging persisted. Underground newspapers circulated clandestinely. BBC broadcasts were secretly received in some households. Church networks sometimes provided alternative information. Swing youth and other subcultures rejected Nazi cultural norms. The White Rose student group distributed anti-Nazi leaflets. The Nazi propaganda machine ultimately failed with Germany's defeat in 1945. However, the Nazi regime's system of information control and propaganda represents one of history's most comprehensive attempts to manipulate public perception. Its effectiveness stemmed not just from technological control or message discipline, but from its deep understanding of human psychology and social dynamics. As we navigate today's complex information landscape, with its own challenges of misinformation, filter bubbles, and algorithmic amplification, the Nazi case reminds us that propaganda is not merely about lies or censorship. At its most effective, Propaganda creates a complete world view that shapes how people process all information they encounter.